This has happened as a result of a concerted effort, a mutual desire to actually return back to normalcy. It's not yet normal, but it is a return back. So it's a bit of a reset, and that's how I would describe the whole chain of events. In terms of its significance, of course, it has a lot of significance bilaterally between India and China, regionally in the Indo-Pacific, and globally. Because today we are at a stage where India's relations with major powers have to be seen together. It's difficult today actually to segregate India's relations with each of the major powers without trying to understand or analyze its impact on other powers, on other relationships, and vice versa, the impact of relations with other powers on a particular relationship. So I think India has moved a lot in the last many years in terms of the impact it has on the global stage.
Good morning, Ambassador. Welcome to Economic Times.
Thank you.
Let us begin with a very important development which has major geopolitical implications, not just for South Asia, but for global geopolitics. Is the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi Jinping of China in a third country, neutral country, but very interesting, which has played a role in the past in Eurasia, in Russia. How did this come about, and what is the way forward in the short term and the long term in terms of geopolitics and regional politics?
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Dipanjan. A great pleasure to be back with you on this show. So yeah, you're right. I think this was by far the biggest and the most significant element of the BRICS Kazan summit. And also you're right that it has global implications, not just for the region. So how it happened, I think obviously a lot of work has been done over the last many months to address some of the core issues which we can discuss. But in April, Prime Minister Modi made a very significant remark to the Newsweek magazine, basically holding out some kind of a olive branch to China, saying that the relationship with China is important for both countries, and based on mutual respect, etc., we should move forward. So I have seen and I know that there has been this desire under Modi 3.0 to break the ice with China and to move forward and go back to some kind of normalcy. The same sentiment is reflected in Chinese attitudes to India over the last 1 year, which I have myself heard and seen. So I think at the political level there was a renewed mutuality of interest. And of course, this reflected itself in meetings at high levels in the last few months in different capitals between our External Affairs Minister at one hand and NSA on the other. And then at even lower levels, at the technical working levels, there were negotiations going on the border issues. So if you see the totality of the political sentiment, the messaging, and of course, I would also add to this the backdrop of global realignments taking place and shifts taking place in India's relations with the rest of the world and in China's relations with the rest of the world. It has not come as a surprise to me that the two leaders actually managed to meet, and this would have only been possible if prior agreement had been reached on the core issues, which it has, as we are now seeing. So this is the answer to your question, that this has happened as a result of a concerted effort, a mutual desire to actually return back to normalcy. It's not yet normal, but it is a return back. So it's a bit of a reset, and that's how I would describe the whole chain of events. In terms of its significance, of course, it has a lot of significance bilaterally between India and China, regionally in the Indo-Pacific, and globally. Because today we are at a stage where India's relations with major powers have to be seen together. It's difficult today actually to segregate India's relations with each of the major powers without trying to understand or analyze its impact on other powers, on other relationships, and vice versa, the impact of relations with other powers on a particular relationship. So I think India has moved a lot in the last many years in terms of the impact it has on the global stage. So bilaterally, of course, we can discuss it, if you like, whenever. But I would say, yes, it has an impact on the bilateral, on the regional, and on the global. And that is why there is so much interest in the summit. But I would not like to get fixated with the meeting of the two leaders. In my view, it is, I think, the beginning of a bigger transition in the coming months. And I would say that Modi 3.0 would probably be marked, unless there is a totally unforeseen event, by a lot of effort being made by both India and China to restore the relationship and to find a new kind of equilibrium, a template, which goes beyond 2020. So I think 2020 was a benchmark, and after that it's been 4 years. So I think India has changed because of 2020, the relationship has changed. I think the Chinese realized that what they set out to do in 2020 did not materialize. In other words, it was a strategic failure in 2020. It was also a military failure in the sense they did not achieve the military objectives. They had political objectives and strategic objectives. I don't think they achieved those either. And on the other hand, it had other spin-offs in terms of India fast-tracking its own accretion to national power through infrastructure development on the border, through external balancing, through fast-tracking its defense industry, the national will, steeling itself, and those, blinkered eyes on China have been removed forever. So we are now approaching China with much greater determination, and I think the intention and the desire to deal with China only from a position of strength. So I think 2020, in a very perverse sense, was actually very good for India. It was a wake-up call. We woke up, and it's not going to be the same again.
So it's a new lens, and India deals with China from a position of strength.
Yes, India has, yes, exactly. I mean, building strength takes time.
Of course.
The question is whether you do business as usual or you fast track, or you put more energy into it. Would India have been as willing and as enthusiastic had 2020 not happened? So in a sense, you could argue that China really pushed India into a situation where India felt it had no choice but to significantly enhance its dealings with Indo-Pacific partners, with Quad partners, from that point of view. And of course, border infrastructure, there's no question, there's much more resources, military modernization, military reform, I mean the whole package, including the economic approach to China, has significantly changed since 2020. So all these are the new reality today, from which and on the basis of which we are now re-engaging with China.
I mean, you mentioned about fast tracking of some of these bilaterals, trilaterals. Some has been successful, some have gone slow because of various reasons. Uh, what is the future of some of these? I mean, it's just only been a week, and I hear some murmurs among some of these countries that India is still interested. Will we like posturing the change without changing the long-term intent in some of these plurilaterals? Because in terms of some of the partner countries, like in ASEAN, they were not very much willing to take an either or position. So they would be very satisfied with the India. Similarly, in Central Asia, although our engagement is not as deep as in Southeast Asia, but would be comfortable that that India, there's a point in India. How does these then work out in terms of particularly Indo-Pacific? Will our Indo-Pacific strategy remain the same, or will it be nuanced?
There will be some countries who might immediately begin to question India's credentials or India's intentions vis-a-vis China, and whether this connotes some kind of a dilution of India's commitment to the Indo-Pacific policy or to Quad. And I think that is actually completely misplaced, because the fact of the matter is that the US and China, if we think of it, have had annual summits every year since 2021, since the Biden administration. It's almost like the India-Russia annual summit. And these are two powers that are locked in confrontation for global supremacy. But they've still had annual summits. Similarly, another Quad Indo-Pacific partner, Australia, has just had two back-to-back summit-level meetings with China in the last 1 year. So I don't see any difficulty or any strange behavior on the part of India and China to decide to re-establish contact at the summit level. But yes, in terms of the long, medium term, till we reach a level of maturity with China where we are less suspicious of each other, or India is less suspicious of Chinese motives vis-a-vis India, and China begins to show greater respect for India's core interests, India will always, and since India is the acknowledged weaker partner, I mean, everyone talks about the power differential. A typical weaker power will always seek external balancing to try and protect itself and secure itself against a more powerful neighbor or country or an adversary. So this will remain. The Indo-Pacific as part of India's foreign policy, commitment to Quad will remain. But we can't swing from going from one extreme of fighting a war with China or establishing a complete era of golden peace with China. We are real, this is the real world. I mean, you live in moments, the way you conduct yourself is based on day-to-day events and based on threat perceptions and interests. But yeah, I think definitely there is a sense that, and even in India, I think everyone is pleased that you've been able to begin the discussion with China. But these are very early days, because obviously a lot is yet to happen in terms of rebuilding the trust, which actually completely broke down in 2020. And the rebuilding of the trust is a two-way street. And here I think the shoe actually is on the Chinese foot. I mean, they, in their own saying, they tied the knot, they have to untie it. And I think they are also under a lot of pressure, internally, economically, externally. So there is also that push coming from the Chinese that they probably do not see great advantage in continuing this standoff with India, and without which we could not have had this meeting.
So there are, people are a little confused about the Chinese motives, right? There's a power differential. and they could have continued for another 3 years, or maybe 5 years, or maybe 1 year. So something really, shaped Xi Jinping's approach. Could be the domestic economy, could be an assessment of India's ties with the West. Over the last 1 year on certain issues, and or could be also an advice from a common friend, partner in Eurasia. So, what really shaped the Chinese approach? If it's largely economics, how will the India-China economic partnership shape, given that there's a huge trade differential and that economic survey has called for certain Chinese investments without asking for dilution of Race Note 3, but in non-sensitive sectors. How do you think this?
Yeah, so on the first part, what instigated or what caused Xi Jinping, if he had a change in mind, what's the reason behind? I think it's an interesting point. I think, look, I have been sensing Chinese feelers for the last 1 year. They've been very keen to restore normalcy. So when we used to tell them, but that's okay, we can always do it, but what do you have to say about 2020? And they would try to put that aside and say, that's the past, let's look ahead. So we used to say, sorry, it doesn't work that way. So, but the eagerness on the part of the Chinese to bring it back on the rails has been in evidence at least for the last 1 year, if not more. They want to move beyond 2020. I think 2, 3, one is, one is the internal economic situation in China, which is admittedly, by their own admission, not very good. Second is they're under severe pressure from the United States and the rest of the West in terms of political and strategic and military pressure. So they're not very comfortable with that. Third is, I think there is a debate and division of views within China on India. So just as there is a similar, multiple views about China inside India, there is also the same thing in China. And so there are people who argue that India is not entirely lost to China. There are others who argue that India is lost. India has swung too far to the West, so we give it up as a lost case. And so this debate between these two segments has been going on. I think this indicates what we have just seen, that that group which believed that India is still in play and India can still be talked to seems to have prevailed, rather than the hardliners who had said that you can't trust India, India is lost, it's too far gone down. Plus, I think they've also seen, being the kind of tactical, strategist and tactical country that they are, that there has clearly been frictions between India and the West in the last 12 months or 18 months for very different reasons. And they are seeing that, and this is in the open between us and the United States, us and Canada, and us and others. So they're seeing all that. So they probably sense that this could be an opportunity for them to come in at a time when the India-West relationship, which was supposed to be ironclad and etc., is not as tamper-proof or impenetrable as people made it out to be. And also, I think they realize that in the Ukraine conflict, India has played its cards quite well. India has shown that it's been able to talk to everyone, and it has been acceptable to everyone. So there's a newfound respect for India. And finally, I think the fact that we held tough from 2020, we basically seized almost all kinds of normal engagement with China, visas, the flights, other contacts. So all of this, and we held firm on the border issues. In fact, even on Depsang and Demchok, what we've just seen is, I think, only because India held firm that we are having this disengagement and almost restoration of status quo prior to 2020. So these are all the multiple reasons. On the economic side, that is the single biggest issue and conundrum for India when it comes to dealing with China. And here I would only say that, look, we seem to be in the same boat as the Americans and the Europeans, which is that you will have multiple China policies. If you look at the US-China relationship, I mean, you know, China is so deeply embedded and integrated into the American economy that even American strategists and even the most hardline analysts agree that a delinking is not a viable option.
You have to de-risk.
You have to de-risk. Similarly with Europe and China. So I think we will see different tracks within India of our policy to China. The political, military, security track will follow its own logic. The economic, trade, investment tracks will follow their own logic because the stakeholders are different. So, in the case of the United States, for example, you are seeing acute strategic and political and military tension, but you're also seeing business going on happily. Yes, there are moves to de-risk or to, you know, onshore, reshore, you know, the Inflation Act and so many other steps are being taken. But none of these are going to have an impact tomorrow. They're going to play out. And so this $700–800 billion trade between China and the United States, or Chinese investments in US treasury bonds and foreign exchange is not going to go away. So similarly, I think we in India should be prepared and not try to resolve a jigsaw puzzle for which there is no solution. We will have to live with different approaches to China. The security, military, defense people have got the free hand to do what they want, to steal ourselves and to enhance our defenses against China. And they will do whatever is necessary to defend India against Chinese in terms of territory, etc. When it comes to the economic and the trade and investment, there is, over a period of time, last 20 years, a lot of Chinese investments and trade that has taken place. Now, you are faced with a bit of a contradiction. One hand, you're looking for surplus capital because you want FDI into India. That surplus capital is not readily available in Western economies, maybe in some sovereign funds, but most of it is available in China. China has the cost advantage. China is ahead in certain technologies compared to the West. So there is that availability, easy access, and there is a hunger here for accelerating. You want to grow at 8%, 10% a year. And there are people in India, like the economic survey, who argue that the color of money is blind. That's the economic argument. That if today I need FDI and money has no color, then I also follow the Chinese model of how the Chinese invited Western capital over the 20-year period, and today the tables have turned in the sense that you see where China stands, using Western technology, Western companies, and so on and so forth. So there is that view. Now, when it comes to the government of India, they have to reconcile all these views, that how much is possible and how much should we do. And here, when you come to the economics, the real issue is of dependency. You don't want to be a colony of China. You can't afford to. You cannot afford to outsource your manufacturing to China, like the Americans have done, or the Europeans. You cannot. The Germans are learning the hard way. Your manufacturing today is 16% of GDP. You want to make it at least 20%. Now, you need to therefore create the conditions in which your companies have a chance. So, before 2020, what we discovered was that there were certain strategic sectors of the Indian economy that were artificially dominated by China. Telecommunications, mobile, ICT, and there was huge ingress into sectors like railways, power, even things like toys and so on. So there was a wake-up call that, why have we allowed all this to happen? So if you're going to allow and open the floodgates to China in the name of saying I'm keen for FDI and investment, then how are your companies going to compete? I don't understand. So a lot of measures were taken, executive measures, in 2020-21 to put a stop to this. And we succeeded in many sectors. So I don't think we're going to roll that back completely. There will be some adjustment, some calibration. But until you are strong enough internally, domestically, see, if you are weak domestically in terms of the economy and you open it up and you're sitting next to a manufacturing juggernaut and the powerhouse of the world, he'll swallow you up. Now, is that what you mean by FDI? I don't think so. Secondly, all this comes with technology. So what is the technology path which India wants to choose for itself in the next 20, 30 years? I think the world is at a crossroads at an inflection where you have Western technologies and Chinese technologies. And then you have this third vision about Indian technology, the whole Atmanirbharta and indigenous development of technology. So when we talk about investment and all, this comes with technology. So do you want Chinese tech? Do you want to also import the Chinese technology? I mean, do you want it in solar? You want it in EV? You want it in AI? You want it in space? You want it in, we did not allow them in the 5G sector, in the 5G technology. But they could have easily come, like they did in 2G and 3G and 4G. So these are the questions which I think are at the top of the mind of Indian policymakers today. And of course, their challenge is how to maximize advantage for India on Indian terms, which is not easy because, you don't live in a unilateral world. When you have partners, they also expect something. The question is how much can you get without compromising or paying a price, whether in terms of economic sovereignty, whether in terms of economic independence, etc.
A bit of, as you said, the hunger here and the Chinese, right, for non-sensitive sectors. The sensitive sectors, even for 2020, some of them were completely closed. We are not part of BRI. We don't take Chinese loans. We don't anywhere allow them in airport, ports, defense, nuclear, space. These were anyway out before 20, and after 2020, the other tech sectors were tight. So, if I concur from your observations, that in areas which are largely non-sensitive and where we can, or maybe do some joint products if things are like needs.
Yeah, so
Solar.
Yeah, so a smart policy would follow what you are saying, and this is the smart policy which the West has followed. In that period, 5, 6, 8 years ago, when they woke up to the strategic threat, the economic threat from China, what did they started doing? They started identifying strategic sectors of their economy which would be closed to China, whether it's ports or telecom or even media, mass media. So I think that is probably a practical way out where instead of blocking and stopping all Chinese investment and trade, we identify those sectors which are of critical importance to us based on our own decision and assessment and keep them away from China. They are not allowed. The Israelis have done it, the Europeans have done it, the Americans have done it. The whole business of semiconductors and chips and all this is a part of parts. So it's possible to do. But there may be some, but like say for example, if you're the power sector, now how much of Chinese investment and technology would be acceptable to you in the power sector? Or take any other sector, telecom or mobile.
Maybe real estate, which is a...
Yeah, but even in any sector I'm saying, supposing you have a situation where China dominates 90% of that sector, right. Would that be acceptable to you? I'm saying even in a non-sensitive sector, red flags should go up if you find a abnormal or unnatural domination by a single country or one set of companies in a particular sector. That is not competition. That is not, free trade. That's something else. And we found that a lot of the Chinese companies had PLA linkages. I mean, they had linkages with the PLA and with the Communist Party. So, yes, there could be certain and there are non-sensitive sectors where we could allow Chinese investment, but that's on investment. When you talk about trade, it's another story, where how do you handle the imbalance with China?
So, are India-China for the larger geopolitics of the region and beyond is also important for Eurasian stability. Because India is as much as Eurasian powers as the Pacific power. While in the last sort of few years, the narrative from certain circles, certain academic, has almost projected India as only an Indo-Pacific, which is not, which is only a half.
Yeah.
And Eurasian stability also helps, groupings like SCO, which function. And it has been held hostage, particularly to India-China differences. And we saw that this all was reached at the political level at its, in Kazan. While, the Russians may, publicly not clear. In your opinion, did they play this in kind of nudging the two partners together? Because Russians have been very conscious of two things. One, that, they may do business with Chinese, which is very tactical in sense and in the market, but the trust is with India, and they do share certain different technology with India. They don't share with Chinese. They don't want to be through their partner. But in the larger geopolitics, they want an RIC kind of, at least. Did they play a role? And how will it play out, in organization like BRICS, which is now gaining traction? It is not, Putin himself made it clear. It's not going to replace the UN. It's not going to replace China. This is not anti-West or North-West. But it's gaining traction because a lot of countries are not feeling their voice being felt in various other organizations. So how does this play?
See, firstly, let's not, jump ahead of ourselves when we talk about the India-China thaw. I think, what has happened is good, but it has to be step by step. No one in India is going to rush into this reset without being extra cautious, having learned the lessons of the past few years. So I would just put a word of caution that while this is good, it's going to move very carefully. People are going to take one step at a time in India, and so that they are not caught wrong-footed again. So that I think we should be very clear about. It's not as if we are going back to some golden era. It's not going to happen. Secondly, about Russia's role, and the Russians have always offered their goodwill and good offices to talk between India and China because of their relations with both these countries. So I am quite sure that they would have again repeated these offers, saying that look, we can actually talk to the Chinese and promote rapprochement between India and China. So yes, at one level, I would say the answer to your question is yes. The Russians have been known to have offered, and it is quite possible that they did play a role. How much and at what level, I don't know. We don't know. But at least one can say they would not have played a negative role. At best, they would have played a neutral role, if not a helpful role in the reduction of these tensions. But they're also very mature in the sense that they will not over-exceed or overplay their hands, because
global player
and they know China is no pushover. They know we are no pushover. And in any case, they have also the very strong misgivings about our relations with the United States and the West. In fact, there are many in Moscow also who question India's commitment to BRICS and SCO and the India-Russia relationship itself. On the BRICS, I would say yes, the India-China relationship and the standoff, of course, affected SCO and it affected BRICS. And I think it was visible to everyone, to the whole membership. And the thing is that India was not self-conscious about it. We said, you know, you call a spade a spade. I mean, if we have problems with China, so be it. I'm not going to sacrifice my bilateral relations or the issues in my bilateral, especially after 2020, for the sake of success of a multilateral organization in which returns for me are not very concrete, like BRICS or SCO. For me, what matters is the bread and butter about the border. If I have a tense border with a military standoff, that is number one priority. Everything else is secondary and, you know, it comes much later. So, so any reduction in the tensions obviously is going to be good for these organizations. It will help them to move forward a little faster. The expansion of BRICS, I think, is again a remarkable development, completely unforecasted for an organization which was questioned, whose existence was questioned, whose efficacy was questioned. And so, since the South Africa summit till today, what do you have? You have from 5, you have gone to 9. You have 13 partner countries and you have more than 30 who have applied for membership. Now, even if people had said that this is all the Chinese plot to expand BRICS, let us assume that is correct. How much credit can you give to the Chinese to get 30 countries to apply? Surely the Chinese do not have that kind of diplomatic weight. So we are getting the wrong end of the stick. The real story here is that there is a huge number of countries who feel it is necessary or desirable to become part of BRICS. So that for me is the big story. And that is a big signal to everyone. And it speaks of the chaos and the rudderless nature of international governance and politics today, and to the dissatisfaction of the Western-led world order, that they are not able to either prevent or solve conflicts. And the voice of these countries are not being heard. So it's not as if they're ganging up against the West, but it's just that they feel there is utility. And they also feel, and they also are not, and all this which is happening suggests that there are many countries in the world, such as the ones we have spoken of, who do not believe that Russia and China need to be isolated or that they are both evil. It is a complete validation of how India views the world.
And my last final, what is your assessment of India-China, like India-Russia relations? I mean, 2 back-to-back visits within 3 months. I mean, of course, we are, we don't have a peace proposal, but we are definitely a messenger of sorts.
See, I think our relations with Russia again stand validated and vindicated today compared to the kind of tempest, the political tempest we faced in February 2022 by the West, where we were painted as the enemy by supping with Russia. 2 years down the line, 2.5 years down the line, there is a much greater understanding, if not acceptance, of the logic of the India-Russia relationship. So again, it is a vindication of the fact that you stood firm. You did not befriend Russia in 2022. You did not befriend Russia to spite the West. You befriended Russia for reasons that go back 70 years and which are transparent and known to the whole world. So the logic of that relationship is as sound as it is today. The only thing is we have to reinvent, number one. Number two, today European countries are coming around and telling us, do something to put a stop to Ukraine. No one is interested in the prolongation of the Ukraine war because it is not helping anyone. This idea that you will fight till the last Ukrainian is not being talked about anymore. The idea that you can defeat Russia on the battlefield is not being seriously considered by anyone. In fact, the mood is changing in Europe and in some sections in the United States. We'll wait for the elections, where they're saying, let's put a stop to it. And the third thing is, we have to reinvent or reset our relationship with Russia in the light of contemporary developments. India is not what the India was of the 90s. Our needs are different. Russia has the capabilities to meet our needs, and particularly in the area of energy, in the area of raw materials, in the area of Eurasian security. There are many things which Russia can, and the Arctic, the Far East. So we have to reinvent and look at our relations with Russia.